How big is your gospel? Not how big is your faith. How big is your gospel? This matters a lot when it comes to the upcoming generations.
If your desire is to become spiritually stronger, emotionally healthier, and relationally smarter, you're at the right place. Speaker and writer Stephanie Smith inspires and equips you to achieve these three key aims. If you're a parent, you'll also learn how to raise empowered kids, ready for adulthood. Let's get started.
Welcome back. I'm delighted that you are here. Whether you are a first-time listener or you have been listening for a long time, thank you for sharing your time with me today. Hey, if you haven't already, would you just leave a rating and a review? It takes like 30 seconds, and it helps me to know what's resonating with the listeners, and it also helps other people to be able to find this podcast. We are continuing today with the series on why kids are walking away from the Christian faith and what can we learn from the data, and then what can we do about this. I'm going to give you a lot of statistics. I've already done that in the last couple of episodes, and I'm going to hit you with some more today. But here's the thing. We want to be people who are able and willing and ready to face reality, no matter what it is, whether it's encouraging or discouraging, because we are not called to be people who live with the spirit of fear, but with power and love and of a sound mind, with agency, with empowerment, because if God be for us, who can be against us? And wishing things were otherwise isn't going to change anything. Change only comes when people face reality and determine to do something about it. So why are kids walking away from the faith? Well, I've categorized the research that I've done into three areas. One is looking at the impact of culture and the church, and then what happens in the home. So we've talked a little bit about culture. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what the data shows from their experiences with church. Now, not all of the data, but a lot of it is centered around the studies that have been done with Gen Z. These are roughly young people that have been born between the ages of between the years of 2000 and 2015. And these aren't just small studies. These are some significant studies from very reputable sources. And when kids that have walked away, these are kids that grew up in Christian homes and going to church, attending church regularly, very involved in church even. When they are asked why they have chosen to walk away from Christianity, then the data shows that when it comes to church, one of the reasons is that basically it's just the gospel is too small. For example, 33% say church is boring. 25% say they just don't see that Christianity is relevant to their career or their interest in life. 24% say Christianity doesn't really prepare me for real life. 23% say Christianity doesn't help me to find a purpose for life. And get this is a sobering statistic. 23% say, God just seems missing from their church experience. I mean, do you get that? God is missing from their church experience? There's a lot of other great things there, but God just kind of seems to not be a big part of it. And so we need to be paying attention to that, because sometimes what we mean to communicate with young people and what we end up communicating is very, very different. So we have to really be attuned, not just to what our motives are and our intentions and our goals are, but how are these being received? What are we actually communicating? Not what do we think we're communicating or trying to communicate, but what are we actually communicating? Another reason that people are walking away from the church is because the biblical ignorance is high. 23% of church active Gen Zers, again, these are kids who are actively involved in church, say that the Bible isn't taught often or clearly enough. You can't align your life to the truth of the Bible if you don't even know what it says. Recently I was at a writers' conference, and one of the instructions that was mentioned in one of the sessions, actually, I think it was more than one session, is that you used to be able to abbreviate different books of the Bible. So, for example, Lamentations, you didn't have to write out the whole word. You could just maybe put LAM period, and people knew what you were referring to. And they were like, you can't do that anymore. This isn't just if you're writing for the secular cult. If you are writing for church people, for Christians, you can't do that anymore. Not just for young people, but even for adults, because you can't assume they even know what the books of the Bible are anymore. That is pretty sad. And if that is true for adults who actively are involved in church, who have an active faith, how much more true is that for our young people? So biblical ignorance is high. People just don't even know what the Bible says. Another factor as it relates to church, and this is one of the saddest ones, and I understand it, and it breaks my heart, but it is when young people see the moral failures of leaders, and they also have their own experiences with what we might call church hurt. And, as I am recording and when this podcast airs, there even just this calendar year, we've had yet another story come out. And won't get into the details of that, of someone that a lot of young people really looked up to. And that came out with revelations, about living a double life for a number of years. And my heart breaks for that individual, because nobody really sets out to do that. Nobody says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to live a double life for the next, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And I then want to have a devastating impact on entire generations. Nobody sets out to do that. Okay, well, I shouldn't say nobody. There probably have been some people, but the vast majority of people who end up in these positions of notoriety, and then it turns out that they have lived this double life, are not people who have been living with genuine peace. They are not people who have been living the fullness of their life with openness and transparency, and the cost is high to them, to their families, to their immediate circle, but it's also high to the general population. And when our kids continue to see and experience, and because of technology now, it's not just people within their own community. At one time, you didn't really hear or you didn't feel connected to people that you were never going to see in person, or that you were never going to have a personal face-to-face relationship with. But now, because of technology, kids grow up feeling very connected to people. They feel connected to people in the entertainment industry. They can feel very connected to other pastors, to church leaders, to speakers, to influencers, and in all these different areas. And then when that person fails, they feel as let down as if this is somebody that lived next door to them, or the pastor of their church, or someone within their geographical community. And so we don't want to minimize the impact of people that maybe our kids have never met, never will meet, but they still have felt a connection to them. And even when we have these moral failures that happen, and young people aren't personally connected or feel connected to this person, it still has an impact, right? I mean, it still saddens me. it still makes me kind of question, is there anybody who is really truly trustworthy and transparent? Is there anybody that reaches any sort of level of success that isn't a fake or fraud at some point in their life, or isn't hiding something terrible in their life? And it can make all of us sensitive to cynicism, and you get enough of that, and hey, why even bother with being a Christian? But it's not just the big moral failures that make the headlines that turn young people off to Christianity. It's their own personal experiences. It's the experience that they have with a youth pastor, with a Sunday school teacher, with an adult volunteer within their church, with other kids that they go to a camp with. And I'm not even talking about when it reaches the level of something that would be a criminal case of abuse. I'm not even talking, it doesn't even have to reach those levels in order for it to have a profound impact on their view of Christians and Christianity and faith. It can be things that are said that are hurtful and harmful. It can be the belittlement of their own concerns, of their own struggles. It can be the person who gets up and who leads the worship service, or who has this great teaching, and then they hear this person telling an inappropriate joke later. Or they see this person in a different setting putting down their spouse, being really unkind to their kids. It's these types of things that have an impact on young people as well. Also, when it comes to church, another significant reason that young people that have grown up in church and grown up in Christian families and have chosen to walk away from Christianity, when they are interviewed about their reasons for why, one of the top reasons is because basically they say the church gives simplistic answers to complex issues. Dallas Willard has a quote in his book, The Divine Conspiracy, where it says, "It is not possible to trust Jesus or anyone else in matters where we do not believe him to be competent." And sometimes the reality is in the way that we treat the gospel, we really kind of act like Jesus and God are incompetent. Because we don't engage with complex issues other than in these simplistic ways. And then what happens? That's really saying, we don't want to go there. That's a little spooky for us. That's a little scary for us. We don't really think that God or Jesus are competent to be able to wrestle with and to deal with significant, complicated issues. And so we want to give these simplistic answers. And so we say to the young person who has lost a parent that's perhaps passed away in a tragic accident or from a terminal disease, and we say these stupid things to them like, well, God just had a reason that they needed to call that, your mom or your dad home. What kind of ridiculousness is that? We sow seeds then in that child's heart and that young person's heart that is found nowhere in Scripture. When we look at the Old Testament and we see that there were times that God allowed or even caused judgment to come on the nation of Israel because they were not following him. Well, God gave warning after warning after warning about what was going to come. I mean, he tells in gruesome detail what was going to happen. And I'm not even going to say some of those things. You can go back and read that for yourself in the Old Testament. But he says in gruesome detail, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen to your sons. This is what's going to happen to your wives and your daughters when these nations come in and invade you and take you over. And I'm telling you this now so that you'll listen and you'll turn around and you will repent, because I don't want this to happen to you. I don't want to watch these disasters that are going to come. I don't want to watch the abuse that's going to come on your children. And people didn't listen and those things happened. But it wasn't because God wanted those things to happen. As a matter of fact, he had done everything possible to try to get people to turn around so they wouldn't happen. We live in a broken world. And as a result of that, there are times that our bodies break down. We are exposed to factors. We have things that get happened in our genes and our DNA. And we need to be mindful and careful of when we give these simplistic answers to these hard situations on an individual and personal level to our young people. It is far better to just say 3 simple words, I don't know, than to say, well, God had a reason, God had a plan. Well, I don't know, I can't explain that. Let's not even try to go there. Let's not even wrestle with that complexity. Let's just wrap it all up and basically say, God has a plan, and that therefore, which is pretty much like a dead end sign. Okay, let's not go beyond that. Turn around, go back and find your new normal, because that's as complex as we can go. That doesn't mean that we have to come up with fake answers. There are things that we just can't answer in this world. And it's not so much that young people are saying we have to have answers. We have to have formulas. We have to be able to make sense of every single thing that happens. It's a matter that what they're running into is we can't even have the conversations about these complex issues because all we get are these simplistic answers to that. So how big is your gospel? Is your gospel big enough that it can handle doubts, that it can handle questions, that it welcomes those, that it invites those, that it doesn't respond to those with these simple formulas and platitudes? Because our young people have complex issues that they are having to deal with. I mean, if you look at every single aspect of life, they're having to sort out in this world where there's no universal beliefs about morals and values and gender and how do we care for the earth. And then you look at the economic insecurity and all these different things. If we're not willing to even step into the ring of things that are complicated and to say, okay, let's wrestle through this, we might not come away with a, quote, solution. We might not come away with an answer in the sense that, okay, now everything makes sense, but we can at least do the work of saying our gospel is big enough to handle this. It's big enough to handle the questions and to be able to engage in acknowledging there are some things that are hard and they're not going to be resolved with just a simplistic statement. And number 5 in this reasons that I put in this category of church as far as why young people are walking away from the faith is a phrase that one of the authors in one of these books said, and I just thought it was so good. It was a moralistic, therapeutic deism. And this is a quote. God is something like a combination divine butler and cosmic therapist. He is always on call, takes care of any problems that arise, professionally helps his people to feel better about themselves, and doesn't become too personally involved in the process. That is the gospel that a lot of our young people have been taught. It's what they've seen, it's what they've heard. Again, what is God? Basically, again, he's this divine butler and cosmic therapist. What does that make God? It makes him my servant. It makes him someone who serves me, who helps me, rather than it makes him God that I am called to serve. And if you've listened to the previous episodes, hopefully you're by this point, you're able to see this thread that's running through here is it's very much of a me-centric way of showing up in the world when it comes to the self-esteem that becomes a very me-centric, when truth is something that is found within me, not something that's found outside of me that I have a responsibility to. And when we kind of have this gospel that makes it really a very small gospel because it's about me. It's all about what do I want, how do I feel, rather than about God and how I am to relate to Him. It becomes this flip of God and how He's supposed to relate to me. You know, C.S. Lewis had an essay that he wrote called God in the Dock. Now, this isn't dock like a boat dock that we would have, that we would probably use that word in the United States. But he was using the word dock in the sense of God on the defense stand. God is on trial. He's standing up there and in the box. It's called the dock. And we put God on trial. Rather than allowing God to put us on trial, we have switched so that now we put God on trial. And so, of course, C.S. Lewis wrote this several decades ago. And as true as it was then, it's even more true now. But it has so infiltrated our thinking, our teaching, and even our churches that we inadvertently have made God to be someone who serves us and our needs rather than the other way around. And ultimately, that creates a gospel that's pretty small. We have the actual gospel that is not about God serving us. It is about us finding our place and our purpose in obedience and relationship to Him. It is a gospel and a God that says, "Come, let us reason together," who says, "Come to me with your questions. Come to me with your concerns. Pour out your heart towards me. You can come to me with your doubts. You can come to me with your lamentations. You can come to me with your pain and your sorrow and your suffering and your grievance, and you're not going to find somebody who is either going to give you simplistic answers, and you're also not going to find somebody who is going to shame you for even having those questions." And also, of course, one of the things that we can do is to look at what are the practices and the protections that we set up in our own lives as individuals, and then also, as it's appropriate, within the Christian organizations, whether they're churches or Christian schools, homeschool groups, whatever they are, camps, whatever they are, we need to practice the utmost, highest forms of integrity and transparency and accountability and humility so that we can do everything possible that our young people do not continue to see and experience the heartbreak and the fallout when our leaders, whether they are paid staff, whether they are volunteers or whatever, fail with these moral failures that are just can be devastating to young people. How big is your gospel? Is it big enough to talk about life's purpose, not just our eternal destination, but our purpose for life here and now? Is it big enough to wrestle with hard questions and not feel like you have to come up with simplistic solutions? Is it big enough to give both grace and truth when people fail at any level and to any degree? How big is your gospel really? Because that is going to make a difference in the lives of the young people that you impact. Next week, we're going to continue with this series, and we're going to look at what are young people saying about the impact of faith in their home and how that has impacted their decision whether to stay or whether to walk away from the Christian faith. And again, I have a message that I give on this as well as other topics for parents. Bring me to your area. whether it is with your church, your Christian school, a homeschool group, or you get people together and you have an area-wide event, because there is tremendous power when people have shared knowledge, shared language, and they have some tools that they can use, not just for themselves, but kids know, hey, you know what? I'm going to get the same thing here that I'm going to get here, that I'm going to get here. And there's going to be unity in my community, and that will exponentially increase your impact, because you do have an impact that is immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. Visit the website stephaniepresents.com and sign up for High Impact to join the mission of building spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart women and families. You can also book Stephanie to speak at your event and check out additional resources. Together, we can invite and equip generations to engage fully in God's grand story.